Hello YouTube, my name is Zach, and today I'm going to be analyzing the singer Maynard James Keenan of Tool and A Perfect Circle and Pucifer, or however it's pronounced. I'm sure you guys are very much familiar with him. I'm a huge fan of Tool. I have been since I was probably 12 or 13. Tool was the band that probably convinced me to study and analyze music. I remember analyzing the Alice album and when I was 14, just inside and out, and realizing that the depth of it made me see how much was behind music and its creation. So I have a lot of respect for this band. I've always been a big fan of theirs. And so I'm going to be analyzing Maynard. He is a very interesting singing figure, and I think that you guys might be interested to hear some of the things I have to say about him. How about the NFL season? Yes, I can't wait. Starts up on Thursday. I'm a Falcons fan. Sorry, those of you who aren't, but I can't wait. I got a day off of work, so I'm kind of taking it easy. I usually do these videos with my work clothes still on and whatnot, so I'm just kind of relaxing at home today. So anyway, without further ado, if you haven't seen my videos before, this is an objective analysis. I'm not taking into account that I'm a fanboy of Tool or that I have been for years. I'm going to look at this as objectively as I can, as if Maynard wanted to take voice lessons from me, and I'm going to treat it the same way that I would if he came into my studio and were wanting vocal advice. So without further ado, this is 46 and 2. They were performing in 1996, right after the Anima album was released. So this is pretty much when Maynard was in what I would call his prime form, in his best shape. So here we go. This is 46 and 2. So first off, I know that was really hard to hear. This video quality isn't perfect because it's a bootleg recording from the mid-90s, so we're just going to kind of have to live with it for what it is. You notice he was doing this whispered, covered singing sound, and I've spoken against that in the past because of the mechanism that is used to create the covered sound. When you sing with so much air over the folds, the air expels a lot faster than it normally would, and the folds don't fully close. So when your vocal folds don't fully close, they don't touch together consistently, and so the vibrations occur on smaller portions of the vocal folds, and as a result of that, certain parts of the vocal folds get overworked, and it can lead to things like nodules. One of the things that I've always said about that, though, is, and I'll say it again here, is that anything is okay if you do it in small amounts. Now, these singers that do covered singing all the time is their shtick, and I've referenced John Mayer and Adele and people like that, when they use the covered singing all the time, that's when you are going to develop nodules. Doing it for artistic purposes because you want to do a line or two in a song with a specific affect, it's okay. Just don't do it all the time. You want to be singing with full chord closure and have it correlate close to your speaking as much as you possibly can when you sing. And so I want to make that clear. There's a couple of other things I'm going to clarify in this video as well, because that's one big question that I've gotten from people. Covered singing is not terrible in small amounts. It's when you do it all the time that it becomes a problem, much like anything that's potentially destructive to your body in any kind of way. So one thing that I've always said about Maynard, even before I was really studying the voice and studying the way that singing works and that kind of thing, back when I was just singing in choirs in high school and whatnot, one thing that I've always appreciated about him is that he is an extremely artistically honest singer, in my opinion. I believe that he doesn't have the biggest vocal gift. Now, I don't mean that he's a bad singer by any stretch, but when I say he doesn't have the biggest vocal gift, it's not like he can sing 4 octaves and can, break glass and can sing opera and, make people hear him 10 miles away. His voice is not a huge voice, and he typically keeps his ranges pretty small. He usually does most of his melodies and choruses and whatnot within a range of an octave, and it very rarely goes much further than that. And it's okay. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be a 8 octave, doesn't really exist. You get maybe 4 octave. You don't have to be a 4 octave singer to be talented and to be good at singing. Those people are just exceptions to the rule, and they're just freaks, and vocal freaks exist. Maynard has always been very good at taking what he has and utilizing it, and he doesn't try to step outside of what he is as a singer. If you ever watch him in an interview, or if you ever listen to him speak and anything like that, you will find that his speaking voice and his singing voice are very similar. They're very closely linked, and that's something that I always argue that singers should try to strive for, is as honest of a sound as they can possibly create. Even when Maynard speaks, which I did didn't include at the beginning of this. Like when he speaks talking to the audience through the microphone, he doesn't yell like a lot of frontmen get up there and, oh yeah, you know, they get up and scream and try to get the audience like yelling too. He's very calm and his demeanor is very dialed down. He doesn't scream, he doesn't yell, and I think that part of that could be that he's trying to save his performance because he does do some screaming type stuff, but he's very honest with the singing, and his approach is not one of trying to do things that his body doesn't naturally do. Now, his physical mannerisms are pretty unique, and they affect his posture, but as I'm going to point out at other points during this video, you can tell that he's trying to keep his posture somewhat upright. If I recall correctly, he had choir training when he was in school. He doesn't have a huge singing background other than singing with bands. But he's developed a really nice sense of consistency through what he did. So I'm sure that he's learned at least a little bit of vocal fundamentals. As if you notice a lot of this, even when he's moving around, he's trying to keep his neck and his head aligned. And that's usually a sign of at least having some sense of understanding of how posture works with the voice. So that's just sort of a general overview of his singing up to this point. It's very honest, and he focused more on the artistry than trying to be some huge singer and trying to create sounds that his body may not naturally want to create. So that's a very good thing. Right there. So when he sings the word over, he kind of leans on the He goes over. He does like that. And while it's not destructive vocally, it's probably not the best approach to singing a vowel like on over. We American English speakers kind of have it rough because our speaking affect and our accent it leans a lot on consonant usage, like hard consonants and voiced consonants, like we do that a lot. And in singing, doing that kind of thing typically causes your vowels to be shaped in unnatural ways. And if you think of like the British approach to English, speaking English, if they see the word over, they're going to go over, over, over. And there's an O and a V. So the vowels would be O and And in America, we go over, and we stick that hard R on it. And what that does is it just sort of distorts the vowel. It also makes your embouchures and the setup, the configuration inside the mouth to create your vowel a little bit off, so you're not going to get as good of resonance as you would if you used a V, ova, as the vowel. When I was in college, they always used to tell me to think about singing from a British perspective. Like, think of British vowels. Don't try to sing like with American vowels. Now, in non-classical music, people don't really think anything about it. So when you're talking about your favorite performer that you watch live or whatever, they probably are going to do that. They're going to use a lot of like ers and things like that on their vowels. I mean, and it's not the end of the world. They're not going to destroy their voices from doing it. It's just in terms of strictly objective vocal efficiency, singing your vowels that way is not as efficient as if you allow the vowel to be the functional asset in making the sound. So in the r from the R is the functional, and if you go over, the vowel is what's most functional. So while it's not the end of the world, it's worth pointing out if you're ever wanting to become like a more technically proficient singer, those are the types of things that you need to be aware of when you approach music from that perspective. Okay, so there's a few things to point out here. And one of the things I want to talk about first is a big question that I get. A lot of my students that I've actually picked up from this YouTube channel have wanted to understand why singing with a high larynx is bad. And some of them have asked like, okay, well, you're trying to get me to sing with low larynx, and that's like your whole thing. You want me to lower my larynx, and I kind of like the sound that I create when I sing with a high larynx. First off, I want to point out that singing with a neutral to high larynx is not inherently destructive. I want to point that out. I want to make that very clear. Singing with a high larynx just makes the vocal tract smaller. The way that your voice would project more naturally is through the expansion of the vocal tract, the raising of the soft palate, to give more room in the throat and in the mouth for reverberation. It's very similar to the difference between acoustic guitars and electric guitars. Electric guitars have to be amplified externally because the strings make a softer sound because all it is just the wood and the electronics. Whereas in an acoustic guitar, you have that big sound hole and you have the body of the guitar, and the resonance and the reverberation from within the guitar is what allows the sound to project outward. So you can think of the voice the same way. If you create a bigger vocal tract, your body's going to allow it to project more because there's more space and more room for the reverberation to happen. Whereas if you have a high larynx, the vocal tract is very small. So it needs to be either amplified externally or you have to push harder to project. So the whole thing about high and low larynx is that if you're trying to project and you want to have a big voice, it's much safer and it's much more sustainable to have a larger, more expanded vocal tract. Whereas if you're singing quietly or you're just singing like normal volumes, singing with a high larynx is not a big deal. In opera, when we use low larynx, the idea behind it is that we are trying to project unamplified. True opera does not use a microphone because we are trying to duplicate the art form when it was created. So, in the 1700s, there were no microphones. So if there's no microphone, how do you make yourself be heard over a concert hall, over an orchestra of 200 or however many instruments, right? We had to find techniques, and we found that lowering the larynx, raising the soft palate created this laryngeal tilt that created a formant frequency that would carry over orchestras and carry through concert halls. So we learn to naturally project the voice using that method and using that technique. It does not mean that you can't sing with a high larynx. It's okay to sing with a high larynx, just don't push. A lot of times if you try to project, you build up a lot of subglottal pressure and the folds push a lot harder. They work a lot harder. The muscles engage much more aggressively when you have a high larynx and a smaller vocal tract. So if you're singing with a high larynx, you just have to be very mindful of how much strain and how much pressure you're putting on your vocal folds. It's not bad to sing with a high larynx inherently. Tons of people have done it throughout time and they've saved their voices. You just have to be more measured in the dynamic levels of sound that you create with your voice. And the reason this correlates is that Maynard is exclusively singing with a high larynx throughout all this. And you don't hear any push or strain in his voice until he starts singing in this high range. That's when you start hearing the strain and the push. When he's singing in his normal, regular, like middle of his modal register, kind of fundamental frequency type range, there's no issue whatsoever. It's completely healthy. It's completely fine. And it sounds on the voice and it sounds clear. And it sounds distinctive because he's using his actual voice and not trying to mold it to sound like something else. So maybe that gives you some better perspective. What I'm listening for is a ringy, deep, full resonant sound to listen for the low larynx sound. And there is a distinctive quality difference between the two. And perhaps I'll make a video in the future kind of comparing and contrasting the two so you can all see what the difference between singing with a high larynx and a low larynx is. Just number one point to take away: high larynx, moderate level larynx singing is not bad for you if you don't push. If you're pushing, it is bad for you, and it can lead to nodules, it can lead to muscle tension dysphonia, it can lead to ruptures, all sorts of different things. So there you go. Hopefully that clears it up for some of you. Now with women, it's slightly different, but we're dealing with a male singer here, so I spoke a little bit about it with Haley Williams. Typically, it's more important for women to get a raised soft palate and not worry about the larynx itself too much because the larynx is structured a little bit differently than it is with men. But that's a different subject for a different day. Let's keep going. One thing to point out about him too is it's kind of, the video quality is pretty blurry, but you can tell just by looking at it, he doesn't have any facial tension. For the sounds he's creating, he's keeping everything very relaxed and very free. You can tell that if there is push and strain, it's all internal and it's not external at all. So that's a really good habit. The sound he's creating does sound forced, and it does sound like he is pushing from down below a little bit too much. I would say that from a strictly objective perspective, that's not good for you. But he's done a pretty good job of remaining consistent. I don't know, if he's had voice coaches. I don't know what kind of vocal habits he's followed. I know he did drugs and whatnot, but I don't know what specific type of vocal hygiene he's practiced throughout the years. But at this point in his career, he was still very consistent, and it sounded, pretty even and close to what he put on record, which is something that's respectable in and of itself. But I would mostly just say that he just sounds like he's pushing, especially on these choruses, and he's singing with a high larynx. So that, those are things that if he's going to sing aggressively like that, I would suggest he lower the larynx at least a little bit and not push so hard. See, it's obvious here that he's not thinking about any kind of technical elements of it at all. He's been over, he's trying to be expressive, and that's fine. Like, I don't want you guys to think that my whole MO of this is to say, oh, people who choose to be artistic in their approach to singing are just bad because they don't have perfect technique. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you are aware of the things that you're doing, and at least you can do them in some sort of measured approach. He knows he's got like leaned over posture, but he's trying to create an artistic affect. He's trying to create a certain sound. He's trying to make his voice fit a certain way in the music. And he doesn't just do that all the time. It's not habitual. It's a choice. So if it's a conscious choice to do these things that aren't good for you in the long term, it's different. It's just like if someone eats cheeseburgers from McDonald's or somewhere every day, every meal, all the time. Well, there's a difference between someone knowing that those cheeseburgers are really bad for you in the long run and someone who doesn't know. So if you know that the cheeseburgers are terrible for you and you eat them every meal anyway, okay, that's your choice. That's fine. It's up to you. And yes, it's going to cause you health problems in the long run, but you're making a conscious, informed, non-ignorant approach. If you just eat all the time and someone tries to tell you like, hey, you probably shouldn't eat those cheeseburgers because those cheeseburgers are really bad for you, and you go, oh, well, that's just the health industry trying to tell me what I can and can't do with my body. I mean, I get that approach a lot from people when it comes to voice. When I'm, even students that I get on a regular basis, I'll tell them, hey, this is unhealthy. This isn't good for you. And they say, oh, well, that's just people coming up with this like attitude of what's right and what's wrong about singing. And it's so much more nuanced than that. Since the voice is a part of your body, and it's not something external, it can't be replaced. And I've explained this before. And because it can't be replaced, and it is connected to other elements of our physical health, you have to be a little bit more mindful of the things that you're doing to it so that your actions don't affect health elsewhere in your body, unless you just don't care. And if you don't care, that's your decision too. I would hope that someone, that would want to be a singer or an artist or whatever for the rest of their lives would want to take care of that artistry, want to take care of that instrument. But it's up to them, that's totally their choice. Maynard here is clearly making choices of artistic expression. I would never say that his posture here is good. I would never say that singing in this covered sound is good for you, ever. They're not. There's no way that you can argue they are. There's so much data arguing that they aren't good for you. But it's an artistic choice, so I'm not going to sit here and say, Maynard, you can't do that. That's the difference, and that's the distinction that I want all of you to take away from this. See, there's a perfect example. He was on The Voice, singing on The Voice, and then on this phrase, he's decided that he's going to take it off The Voice, and he's singing with a little bit more covered. So it's clearly like the melody's the same at the first half as the second half. So he made a conscious decision, sing with full voice, sing with covered sound. But it's not like he just started the whole thing with a covered sound the whole time. So the fact that he's making a choice tells me that he's trying to be artistic. He's trying to be expressive with that particular tool in his toolbox. Oh gosh, that was a terrible pun, wasn't it? I didn't even realize it. Yes, tool. Okay, forgive me, that was terrible. So, but you get the point. That's one affect he can create. It's a vocal color that he can create, but he doesn't just lean on it the whole time. It's a choice. So he's got a pretty unusual stance in the way that he's singing. Like he's kind of leaned forward a little bit. But if you look here, I mean, he's keeping this aligned. It's just sort of tilted. Like it's almost like he's sitting down in the air. And that's a good teaching point anyway. If you are sitting down and you're trying to sing, if you kind of sit up on the edge of your chair and you just make sure that you're upright from your waist up, it's fine. So I guess in a sense, he is upright. It's just leaned and upright. I don't know. I mean, I've always kind of learned that you want to be upright from bottom to top as much as you can, because you ultimately want to be able to engage. Once you get to like really athletic singing, you want to be able to engage your quads. You want to be able to engage your glutes. You want to be able to engage the core muscles, everything below to kind of help support what's underneath. Now, I don't mean like you don't turn into muscle man like Superman and like flex all the time, but you want to have like a stable support structure underneath you to sing. But so I guess it's one of those things where I don't think that the way his posture is right now is inherently destructive, but it's just definitely an unusual position to try to sing from. But at least he is trying to keep his neck and his head and his upper body aligned. That in of itself is good. Yeah, you can see through all of this. His face is not tense. This is a good shot, this whole little phrase is because it's up close. And you can see that even when he's singing in his high range, he's not tensing up. So all the work is being done inside, which is where it should be. The work shouldn't be done on the outside to sing because it just doesn't need to be. Those muscles don't need to engage. So anything that he is doing unhealthy is all strictly internal. It's kind of hard to hear because of the audio quality, and he's singing kind of quietly. But he's kind of leaned this way. This is another good thing about posture. If you listen, some of the notes when he does these intervallic jumps that he's doing, some of them are a little flat. It's not terrible. It's just slight. I mean, just a little bit. And it's probably because his posture isn't aligned. It's hard to develop vocal consistency when you're not aligned. You know, when your body is used to being aligned to create sound, and you kind of crimp that hose. If you put some kind of a bend in the system that's normally utilized in a vertical upright way, it's going to affect the way that things come out. So I would say that in this particular phrase is the first time that I've heard his moving around and the posture effect make a negative impact on what he's doing. And it's not terrible. He's just a little off. He's a little pitchy every note or two if you listen. But as awkward and as unusual as his body motions seem, if you notice, even when he's singing here in that high stuff, while he's moving his lower body around in these weird ways, his head and his neck are staying aligned. So it leads me to believe that someone has taught him that's you need to keep yourself vertical, keep that top part of your body aligned to be consistent. Now, I've seen Tool live twice. Amazing show, by the way. If you've never seen Tool live, you must. Like, this older performance does not do their live shows justice. Seeing them live is incredible, and you should definitely do it. I brought one of my best friends. He's not a fan of Tool at all. He doesn't like their music, period. But he saw them live, and he walked out going, whoa, that was amazing. So definitely go see their live shows. Anyway, I bring that up to say that I've seen them live, and nowadays he does this like he'll like do this like leaning forward and like completely bent down and curved over thing while he's singing, and I don't know. It's hard to honestly hear consistency when you and judge for that kind of thing when you're in a big live setting. And to be frank, even though this may seem hypocritical, when I go see people live, I'm typically not sitting there analyzing everything that they're doing because I'm there to enjoy the show. Which does, it does tell you that I can turn this side of my brain off, by the way. It's just, I'm looking at this from like a calculating sort of academic approach. And when I listen to music, I don't, everything I turn on, I don't go, oh, he had a glottal onset, he had poor breath support, he's covered, therefore I don't like it. It's not like that. That's not how I listen to music. But I do want to help people be consistent and sustainable singers, so I have to be able to turn that switch on and off when I listen. So when I go see Tool live, I'm not necessarily paying as much to how consistent his vocals are. So what my point in saying that is I do know that he definitely has become much more animated, or at least the last time I saw him he was, and he bent over a lot more and did a lot of gyrating, and in retrospect, I don't remember how consistent his singing was, but it certainly does not lend itself to consistency when you do that. Yeah, this is a perfect like side angle. Even though he's bent over, his head and his neck and his back and his everything, his core is completely aligned. So he's making a deliberate effort to do that. So he is definitely putting the sound into his nasal cavity. And like I've said before, one of the time proven ways to make your singing more consistent with a high larynx in your high range is to put the sound into your nasal cavity. And that's why so many singers that we all listen to on the radio and pop music, rock music, anything, use nasal, because most of them aren't doing the low larynx thing. They're using nasal resonance. Nasal resonance inherently isn't destructive. It's just not as efficient, and it's much harder to be on pitch consistently when you predominantly move the sound into the nose. The main reason being that the nose is not a resonator. The nose was not designed to function in a speaking setting. It has a completely different function than the mouth and the voice does. They just happen to be connected with some of the same tubes, so you can send that resonance up the nasal cavity instead of the standard passage of the vocal tract. Now, of course, you do still have sound coming through the mouth when you sing through the nose, but the placement is just different. And placement is another subject that I plan on making an entire video on in the future, because it's something worth going into, understanding how the placement of the sound in the mouth and in the throat and in the nasal cavity do definitely affect the way that the sound comes out and the efficacy and the efficiency of the sound. So he is using his nasal resonance here. It's high in his range, and he's using a high larynx. So all those things do make sense. If he wanted to take it out of his nose to sing this stuff, he would need to lower the vocal tract, take the sound, probably take it out of his nose, put it more like mid-mouth resonance, but that's a different subject for a different time. If he were my voice student, I would tell him to do that, but knowing the interviews with Maynard, he probably would just tell me to shove it, and he's going to sing how he wants. He's very rebellious and going to do things his way, so whatever. Very, very consistent performance all the way through. There are several reasons for this. He sticks to his own voice. He does not try to manipulate it or change it into something that it is not. He's very musically and vocally honest. He does not try to stretch into ranges that his voice doesn't naturally want to reach. He doesn't push too much. He makes conscious choices as the types of sounds that he makes, and he has an artistic goal, and he kind of uses that as his framework of how he creates sounds. So with all those things in mind, I would say that Maynard James Keenan is not the most technically proficient singer by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not trying to be. And so he's done a pretty darn good job over the past 25 or however many years of having a vocal career that's been pretty consistent. I seem to recall there being a few songs that he just refuses to perform now because he doesn't want to damage his voice, like Eulogy. No, not Eulogy. Ticks and Leeches. I can't remember what else. I know Ticks and Leeches is one of them. I know that he struggled a lot with singing The Pot for a long time, and that's a different subject in and of itself, because that song has a ton of pitch correction on it, and I do think that song is one example of him trying to do something that his voice doesn't necessarily naturally lend itself to doing. And if you listen to any of the live videos of him on YouTube from it, most of them are pretty inconsistent, but that song is incredibly difficult vocally for a multitude of reasons, and maybe I'll analyze that one day and kind of give you guys an idea as to why. Anyway, he's a very artistically honest singer. He uses the tools that he has, and he doesn't try to push himself beyond what he's physically capable of, and as a result, his voice is relatively consistent, and it uses very little strain, very little tension, and that's the key. Just stick to what you have. Don't try to be something that you're not. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, and accept your voice for what it is. And those are some generally very, very good rules to follow to make sure your voice stays in good shape. All right, so that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. Also, give me some more suggestions of what to do next. I may do another live stream soon. I haven't decided yet. I'm also thinking about hitting up some of the other social media platforms. I do have an Instagram if you guys want to follow me on it. I'm going to put it right here, and I'm going to put a comment down the bottom. I also have a Patreon. Thank you so much to my Patreon subscribers. You guys are awesome. Please keep it up. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. This channel is growing at an amazing rate, and I'm so happy, and I cannot thank you all enough for it. So thanks for all of your support again. I do give voice lessons, so reach out to me if you're interested. Thank you so much, you all. Take care. Bye.